This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Listen up. Welcome back to the Tapped In Podcast, sales and strategy for beer distributors. Mikey, it's a beautiful day in Michigan. Yes, beautiful day in Michigan. We hope that I actually record the video this time on this one. The last one did not, but I think I got it all set up right this time. So we will see.
We could do a quick plug for our YouTube. I don't think a lot of our post this on YouTube in case you want to see our ugly faces.
Hopefully by this time we'll have all the episodes up on YouTube. Right now we're on podcast 5. We are through episode 2 on YouTube. So we're a little behind. On brand though, right? I mean, right on brand. So today, Mikey, you were on site last week with a client and we're like, hey, we got to talk about Delta 9 more. We loosely talked about it in the THC episode. We need to get more into it and spread the word of what we're learning and hearing out in the field. So do you want to set us up, my man? What did you see last week? What got you all excited? And then we'll kind of dig through the topic.
Yeah, I know we're circling back on the same topic that we kind of had when we loosely just talked about it. And I don't think that we really dove into, the distributor side of things. And now I got to see firsthand the client or the customer side too. I was working with a client last week that was just launching their first Delta 9 products. So when I was on with reps, I got to see firsthand the selling process and see the reception from the customer, from the retailer. So that was kind of cool. That's why I hit you up. I'm like, man, we really need to talk about this. And then also, we've been approached by a couple of clients just asking us on our opinion. They're having suppliers contact them, and they want to know our feedback on if they should carry it or not. So I think this is going to be an important episode, not just for management, decision makers, but also all the way down to the rep level as well.
Yep, exactly. And there's a lot of moving parts around this. So some of the regulatory stuff, we'll touch on that first, is difference around like hemp regulations and THC regulations and which Delta you can use, Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, all this different stuff, HHC. Like a lot of these things are way above my pay grade when it comes to the science behind it. But basically the FDA is turning a blind eye. TTB doesn't even have a dog in the hunt. And the DEA, there it is. The FDA and the DEA are just kind of like ignoring it for right now. So a lot of this right now has fallen back into state-based regulations where you've got places like Minnesota, where it's the wild, wild west. They've got a pretty ironed out process. They're the first movers on this. Then you've got Florida. Florida has got, as of March 6, 2024, has legislation passed that will prohibit synthetic cannabinoids of Delta 8 and 10 and limit the amount of hemp-derived Delta 9 to 5 milligrams per serving and 50 milligrams per container. So that's on the desk of the governor, and we'll see if that gets signed. Then we've got Georgia is legal less than 0.03 THC by dry weight basis. This dry weight thing is like really important in the manufacturing process because if it's dry weight, you're able to do it and have different rules and regs. And if it's whatever it would be called, maybe wet weight.
Yeah, I'm not really sure on that.
But I'm not either. And then you've got places like Texas that have no rhyme or reason. They're just like, cool, 0.03, no more than 0.03, ready to rock. And you got places like New York and South Dakota and Arkansas and Vermont that have basically kind of like cut it down and put some real solid limitations around it and some different milligram ratios. And it's been fully banned in a few other places too, like Idaho. So all over the place from legislation around the regulation of this. So there's a lot of room to run from there. I think the largest risk of people that are running into, like from the beer distributor side, is it worth the risk? Is the juice worth the squeeze? And that's where we wanted to get started today with, is the juice worth the squeeze for those state-based systems that are out there? And if it is, what does that juice actually look like,
Right.
Mikey?
Yeah. I circle back on the Delta 9 versus Delta 8. From what I've read, they're pretty similar, although the Delta 8 is typically less potent. Delta 9 is strictly regulated, goes through a lot of testing and standards, while Delta 8 is unregulated, does not go through the testings. So pros and cons there. I think Delta 9 is going to be the one that obviously emerges from this. And it's also derived from the sativa plant, which is basically like a head buzz, right? Not so much the body buzz like the indica, where indica we just take that part of your sleep real quick, right? You know, your body is relaxed and zoned out. Where they're targeting the sativa plant to where they're going after the same kind of buzz you would get by drinking a few beers. And that's why I feel this is very important. I think this is going to be bigger than everybody anticipates. And I think it's going to cut into the Bev elk more than people probably think it's going to. Just where some of these suppliers are going, not only with their marketing, but what they're putting in the fluid as well. And when you talk about caps and milligrams, I think that's great. I mean, there's no reason to have a 10 plus milligram drink out there. Purpose of these drinks and not to go out and just get hammered as fast as possible, right? It's like the person that buys the 12.5% IPA versus the person that buys a 6% IPA, getting hammered versus being social and just enjoying yourself. I think that anywhere between the 2, 3, maybe even 5 on the high side is where a lot of these drinks are going to find themselves, because it's also going to come from sessionability too, right? I mean, there's not a lot of profit in one and done, as we know from the beer industry. The profit is going to come from, we used to call what, a 5 beer beer. If it's a 5 beer, it's good to go, right? We talked to our suppliers and small breweries about that. Like, hey, you don't come out swinging and have somebody order one drink and be done for the day. You want to order at least 4, and get the ABV down to where you can have a 4 or 5 beer. I think it's going to go in the same direction with these Delta 9 drinks.
Do you see the consumers being different than what your classical beer consumer is, or are they new, or like how is it playing out at retail in the shelf right
Yeah.
now?
So I guess if we look at it like this, the statistics say in the states where Delta 9 is everywhere, Minnesota, it's getting into California pretty heavy. In those states, the Delta 9 or the THC-infused beverages inside of a dispensary is less than 1% of total sales, which tells you that core consumer is going to convenience packaged liquor to purchase this. I learned more about it on site, where this consumer is somewhere we've never really even dabbled or played with. Not necessarily a Bevel consumer, not necessarily a THC consumer, somewhere in the middle, right? We're seeing parents, we're seeing grandparents actually enjoy some of these, especially in the low dosage ones, the 2, maybe 3 milligrams, to where it's just enough to get what they want. Where that type of consumer is not going to go to a dispensary to buy their product. They just don't feel comfortable. It is a little weird, right? You're not walking into a pot shop like, hey, if I can go to my local convenience store and grab this drink, that's where I'm going to go. And because of that, that's why I think it's so important for us to take a really close look at this, because whether us as beer distributors pick them up or not, they're going to be everywhere. The suppliers are really, really aggressive. I've heard some suppliers telling retailers that, hey, if we can't have at least 5 SKUs on the shelf, we can't have anything. They want to have that presence. They don't want to just have one SKU mixed in. And I'm hearing a whole lot of full door targets too, and retailers giving
Mhm.
it to them. And it makes you think, where is that space coming from? I guarantee it's not all coming from non-elk. Some of it's coming from Bev elk as well. So I feel that it's super important to take a close look at this, because, I look at it as the high noon effect, right? I mean, we look back, if I were to came to you 6 or 7 years ago and say, hey, bud, there's this new seltzer on the market, it's 2 or 3 times more expensive than the leading White Claw that is absolutely dominating the category. I think we should take it. You probably would have said, Mike, that's a little ridiculous. We're trying to minimize our SKU count, right? Not carry everything under the sun. But hey, guess what? That product was high use, right? And look at it today. And I also lined it up with the craft boom. The craft boom came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, craft was everywhere. It's cutting into all of our domestic space, import space. The seltzer boom that came with the malt base, high noon now, right? I feel like this is on the same trajectory as a lot of those other fabric came. And if we're not in the front lines, if we're not grabbing these products and getting them out there, someone else will. And then our reps are going to be missing out. Our distributors are going to be missing out. We have to be first. You have to take this serious and get out there with it. Because if not, as soon as some of these regulations get to be a little bit more, in pen instead of pencil, the big guys are going to start playing. When the big guys start playing in the field, we know what happens.
Yeah, that's the piece of the puzzle from a legislative standpoint for some retailers and also some distributors too, is like there is no clear cut legislation and this could go bye-bye tomorrow. Now, when I think about the legislation stuff in Delta 9 and where I would sit, having really the problem is that you got a federal basic permit and that you are the only tier in BevAlc that basically answers to the feds and nobody else does. That becomes a challenge in questioning what you do. I see it as tipping point legislation. So the whole idea behind tipping point legislation is that once the group of us as voters become more than 51 to 60%, there's some kind of that tipping point between those 2 points where it's like, hey, the prevailing thought inside of the electorate is this should be legal. And we're probably there already. So those of us who are willing to get in and be on the leading edge curve of doing this stuff, you're probably more than likely on for a betting playing poker is probably a good bet to make, because the failure of like legalized marijuana or cannabis from a ballot initiative, I don't think they've lost very many times, if at all, across the US, because the tipping point of the legislation, the data shows that the electorate, us as voters, are 60 to 65+%. Like, yeah, then we should probably just like move on from this. And you're probably safe there as well. And Mike, you bring up another good point of that being early and being a first mover, you might not be like collecting or getting the greatest brands right now because there are many things to come. And you bring up a good point around the serious folks have not arrived. And to us, like the serious folks to me is carbonated soft drink, Pepsi and Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper Sample and the Keurig crew and also Molson Coors and Anheuser-Busch and all the big BevAlc. And then you got all the BevAlc spirits, Diageo and Sazerac and everybody else, and then Gallo on the wine side and Constellation. You got all these people that are like, it reminds me of this clip from Succession, and maybe RJ can throw this in where like Logan Roy is like, you are not serious people. And there's that gap right there of where you are not serious people that have joined this game. And I think the benefit that a wholesaler has right now is that if they get in the game now and they get their feet wet and they understand the market and they understand the consumer, when the serious people come to play and they do get in the game, they're going to be able to stand on like, hey, we know how to do this. We have this, we know this insight. We know this. We have a sales team that's educated around it, that knows how to manage it or knows what the consumer's looking for. We have retailer relationships, all this stuff that is going to be around you, wrapped in your institutional knowledge at your organization. So you'll be more ready for the serious folks. And hey, often wrong, never in doubt. We could have a giant $1 billion brand sitting in the Delta 9 world right now that isn't going to come from the serious people. That is reasonable to understand and also probably reasonable to expect too. We just can't we don't know. Nobody knows where this is all going to fall out as well. You said something interesting about dispensaries, like the stigma of dispensaries. What does that look like for the shopper? Is this like, yoga pant mom won't go in the dispensary, so we're more apt to go to the convenience store or to the grocery store. Is that where your philosophy is around
Yeah,
that?
for sure. I think there's a lot of people out there that just they're fearful, they're embarrassed, they don't want to see their car in the parking lot. I am very close to a person that is the exact same way, where just that person will not go to a dispensary. Will ask somebody else to say, "Hey, grab this for me or grab that for me." Has a job in the community that people would recognize their car and recognize them, and just like, "Yeah, I'm not going to take a chance." But great, if this is available everywhere, we get around that, and that's where my eyes were really opened up last week when I was on site. I was talking to some of the upper management there and talking about because they're just launching it. So right now they're just kind of doing some samples, people that they know, or maybe whoever, and the people that were enjoying it the most, like I said, moms, grandparents. One lady was in her 70s, absolutely loved it, and it's different. I find it so much different from eating a gummy, doing whatever, however else you take your THC there. And they're marketed towards that too, right? Their huge marketing is sociability. Being able to still be social while you're consuming and controlling your own dose, which is huge because I mean, let's face it, 12-ounce can that has 3 milligrams, you're gonna probably consume that over 15 to 20 minutes, maybe or 30, depending on who it is. You're not just eating that gummy at one time. And you can also control your dosage. If you're sipping on it and you find yourself wherever you need to be in your happy place, slow down your drink, right? You need a little bit more, drink a little bit faster, have another one. And that's where that dosage control comes in, which I think is super key, especially with the seltzers, to where you can just control it and you can have a little bit. They gave me a couple samples when I was on site, and it was wonderful. You know me, but I love my beer. I true love my beer, but beer is not liking my body as I get older. I'm just getting fatter and fatter, and I'm like, all right, I have to slow down on how much I'm drinking. And this, I could honestly say, would be an amazing replacement. I really enjoyed the buzz. There wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't anything that I felt like, oh man, I need to just sit down and watch TV. I mean, I felt like I could jump on a podcast and do a podcast radio. I felt level headed. I felt great, and I could control my own dose. I could take a little bit more, so it was great. I loved it so much. I ordered a 12 pack as soon as I got home because there are no distributors in Michigan carrying it yet. I think that's the target too, and right on the can, right big letters on the can. So at least the brand that I was with down there, no hangover, right? How huge is that? You go out, you get the same kind of buzz as if you went out and had some beers with your buddy. You wake up the next morning and you feel great because there is no
Yep.
hangover, cloudy headedness, right? And the buzz goes away. The buzz goes away. It's not like beer to where if you have some beers and 6, 7 hours later you still feel a little groggy and like, oh man, I'm drinking all day. It just when it goes away, it's done. So I think that there are some pros there that are definitely going to emerge as a pretty big category.
Well, the part about it too is the acceptability of it, and that's part of the tipping point legislation thoughts too, is like it's just become more acceptable. And we're just the tip of the iceberg in terms of adoption right now on the leading edge of adoption. Where this gets more interesting from an adoption standpoint is your kids' age group, my nieces. I call them the non-dare kids that didn't go through dare, that don't have the same stigma around cannabis or marijuana. That is what is going to be the group that really drives the adoption more than likely. And also, beverage alcohol is still trying to find its footing from a growth standpoint. It's got a lot of negative press around it. Cannabis has a lot of positive press around, like, hey, this is better for you, this or that. And it's almost like it's completely flipped where in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, it was beer and alcohol is, drink a day is good for you and it's all good and it's going to lengthen out your lifespan, and marijuana is a gateway drug and it's the worst thing ever. And now it's like completely flipped. No level of safe alcohol, and we have no data to support that cannabis is good for you long term or the marijuana or delta 9 is good for you long term. But because we have no data around it, then it must be good for you long term, and that that's part of the other episode where, descheduling it and doing more research around it is still needed as well. So the jury is still out long term on what the effects of regular THC or Delta 9 consumption would look like. That is still yet to be seen long term. The short term thing, though, is that it just still looks like that this has got so much mo, and the mo isn't going anywhere, and people are looking for it, and we've got opportunities in that we're business folks. I used to say, and I still do say, I don't have to like everything I sell. If I did, we'd sell a lot less than what we do. And I don't never drank a can of Monster, always sold Monster. I don't even think I ever had one of the bottles of wine that we sold. I don't even know if I tried half of the beers that we sold out there, just because there was just so many things that we did, and I didn't like all of it. So, but we still sold it because it was good business, profitable, and would move. And for the next crew of distributor leaders, we've got to think through, this is an evolution. How do we get prepared for the evolution long term, and what is next for this? Maybe not beverage alcohol as exclusively, but this mood altering beverage category that encompasses this THC products, alcohol, and you even hear things out in the world like, what's that? Cranium, like
Freedom, yeah.
kratom and THC, like THC and kratom products together. And I will watch one person take kratom and was like, never touch that stuff for sure. But you've got all this mood altering beverage category as a whole umbrella that is starting to emerge as well. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on. Do you think that, Mikey, that anybody would tackle a big brand, like a mega brand category, and like move into a mega brand world and not rebrand, but have THC Miller Lite or Bud Light or Coors Light or Bud or anything like that? Or do you think that's a bridge too far?
I think we all already know the answer to that question with what went down with some AB brands and Tilray, right? When that purchase went down, we all asked ourselves, all right, Tilray really getting into the beer business, or are they lining themselves up for something in the future?
They getting in the brand
Right.
business.
So, right now, your choice is Delta 9 drinks or sodas, seltzers, teas, right? But what if you could have an amazing IPA that had zero alcohol in it and 2 or 3 milligrams of THC? What if you could have an amazing shot top, right? Style brand with THC in your alcohol. And who knows? I think that is definitely in the pipeline. And that's just me trying to look into the future and read people's minds. But yeah, I don't see that being out of the question at all. I guess the major question is how is this all going to play out? We're seeing categories emerge. We mostly have seen one, maybe 2 brands dominate. I remember back at our distributor preaching to the choir, preaching to you, preaching to the rest of our team about how big non-alc and low ABV beers are going to be. They were just emerging on the West Coast, and there were standalone non-alcoholic breweries brewing true style beers with no alcohol. And that these were going to be a big thing. There's a consumer base out there from that. Was all right around the time where a lot of states were going recreational for marijuana. So kind of watching that unfold. And I remember preaching that. And unfortunately, I was wrong in that prediction, but I was only wrong in the state of Michigan. It really never caught on as much as I thought. But nationwide, we sit back and we look at athletic, right? This is way before athletic when we were talking about it. Now, look at that brand, look at that supplier. It's huge. But we see when a category like that emerges, not that that category was brand new, but when it hit and it became popular, we see 1 or 2 brands really just take the lead and run away with it. We saw it with White Claw in the malt-based seltzers, Twisted Cheese running away with tea, right? Everybody else is kind of chasing it. Now we're seeing the vodka tea. We'll see who emerges out of that category. High Noon, just with the vodka seltzer character. So when this wave of Delta 9 hits, what is going to be that leader? Who is it going to be? We don't know. But,
Yeah.
and on this podcast, at least on BXP, we always preach, think outside of the box, be creative, take a chance. It might work, right? And we also preach profitability. Well, guess what? These products are highly profitable. It is thinking outside of the box. It is being creative. So it really falls into what we always preach as far as, going out, taking a chance on it. But I guess we'll see how the legalities shake out. But I feel like if we wait too long to see how everything shakes out, it's just going to be too late. What's the number one question everybody asks you in the beer business? Doesn't matter if it's a retailer, some suppliers, friends. What's next? What's next? Hey, Mike,
Yeah.
what's next? What's the new hot thing? After seltzer's there, what's next? Well, guess what, bud? This is next. In my humble opinion, this is next.
Yep. You talk about non-alcoholic and were they going to have beer and were they going to grab on or not in Michigan? And they are still grabbing on in Michigan and they are still grabbing on nationally. They're still moving in a growth trajectory for sure. The stigma is what happens. Like if you order an NA beer, you got to make a whole deal about it. Like if you don't want to be asked a question like, what are you doing drinking a non-alcoholic beer? Then it's got to be like, yeah, you got to get there early and you got to make a deal with a server that you want your Bud Zero or Heineken Zero in a glass and just keep them coming and don't even tell people what you're drinking. And God forbid if they ask to taste what you're drinking too. So there's like this whole like challenge. Maybe this will like wear off over time, or maybe people will get past it, or that it will become more prevalent that it is not the stigma thing. But the Delta 9, like if you sit down at a bar and order a Delta 9, I don't think anybody's going to give you that same kind of stigma. Maybe it's just like, okay, I mean, whatever floats your boat. When in reality, that's what non-alcoholic beer should be too. It's whatever floats your boat, bro. But like the social behavior is not there. It's just weird, right? It's like humans being people being people.
Always
humans
judging,
being
right?
humans.
We're always judging.
So, well, for sure. As Sarah said yesterday, Mikey's background is so nice and yours looks like a mess. Well, that's because we're in the middle of getting new windows in our office and a 3-day project has turned into a 2-week project. It's just like, still got stuff in my office. This is a learned house of beer magic. I can't have your office junk in here, but whatever. So from here, take this as a, hey, I got to learn some more about this. That would be what I would take. If I'm a sales rep and running a beer distributor, I would want to just continue to learn about this and educate myself. Pick up the phone, call people in other states where they're doing this. New Jersey, Missouri, Minnesota. Minnesota is huge. Florida is probably pending. DeSantis is probably going to sign that bill. That's on the ballot in Florida too this fall. Just general legalization of THC as well from a ballot initiative state. So like this is coming to a C-store near you, and you might as well learn about it to decide how you want to attack it, apply it, manage for it, or even start creating relationships with suppliers as they work their way around. Because there is a capacity problem. The stuff is still manufactured and still has capacity challenges, and that there might be good suppliers out in the world that you want to make relationships with that are 18 months, 24, 36, 4 or 5 years away from doing business with you. So building all that out, these are the things that like Atlas struggled to do in the 90s with the craft craze in building these relationships for when it really hit Michigan and when these brands came to Michigan. And we didn't have the same portfolio we could have had if we had done that legwork a decade before the craft craze really kind of hit Michigan. So learn from that if your portfolio is a little light and try not to make the same mistake again. Good episode, Mikey.
My delivery should be here any minute.
What's your delivery? Oh, that's right. We should have waited, but schedules would not allow.
And where we were while we were recording, so that I can take a time out and go grab it.
Time out, don't grab it. Well, we'll have to do a review at a future podcast. So
for those of us listening in the rear, it's Memorial Day weekend, so I will have a couple, and I'll report back.
There we go. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate it. And this does it for this episode of The Tapped In.
Cheers.
Cheers.